Let's try it again. We want to briefly look at the issue of associate pastor. Yeah. You know, everybody in our day want to be a pioneer. Everybody have a calling. Everybody's calling must manifest. Everybody have a vision. And the office, the position, the status of an assistant doesn't look appealing. It doesn't look like something to be desired. Because in that your quiet place of encounter, you know what God told you. You saw the global vision God painted in your heart. So for all of that to now be subject to and drowned under another person's calling, it doesn't look like that can be the will of God for your life. It looked like something that should be a God forbid kind of thing. The other day, I was going through my very old stuff of about 25 to 30 years ago. And I saw the vision of my calling. I saw the whole things that God started me with. And I looked at myself today. And I am an associate pastor. And the question is, all these things that God told me, where are they? I am so proud to let you know that they are all being fulfilled. The reason why a lot of especially young people can't find fulfillment in service is because you are blind. You are looking at the wrong things. And over time, it has been a major distraction to great destinies. Men that God has invested in that could have been a great blessing to their generation, but because its expression is wearing the garment of an associate, is wearing the clothing of an assistant, we carry our human way of reasoning, because in the human system, an assistant is an underdog. You take orders from a boss. You are not an oga of yourself. And usually, just like people that serve their boss in business, particularly what we have among our Eastern brethren, and they can serve for 7 years. Sometimes, as they learn the trade, it's possible that at the end of the 7 years, except God show you mercy with a boss that is God-fearing. When it's time for you to be settled, a story can be activated, can be 1 year to the year of your settlement, they can generate a crisis. And because of all of those risks and tendencies, we transfer that same mindset into ministry, such that when people, for whatever reason, find themselves in that place of service, in being an assistant in ministry, there is this fear, there is this anxiety in the heart that when will I enter my own? I remember several years ago, we have some brethren then that were laboring in prayer. And once in a while, you start hearing quiet comments like, how long will I be serving other people? When will I enter my own rest? When I heard those utterances those days, I knew this is danger. You know, there are some things that it's even a crime to be where those statements are made. So you want to plead the blood of Jesus on your heart quickly. When will I be my own boss? When will I enter into my own rest? So we carry all those issues from our human system with the challenges and the risks and the abuse and bring them into ministry, and that has demonized the position of the associate pastor. It has been turned to some strange things today that does not reflect the will of God. That is why it's so important that we take a brief moment in the course of this conference to look at some things around the associate pastor. The subject is quite broad. The issues to look at are numerous. For some time now, our resident pastor, Reverend Tony, has been sharing burdens with me of how we need to develop a full curriculum to train God's people on the subject matter of the associate pastor. Because there is so much ignorance and hence there is so much confusion that is creating several kinds of abuse. But our time this morning is very, very short. So we'll trust God to just scratch here a little, scratch there a little, and trust God to make sense and see how we can commence the conversation on the subject of the associate pastor. The first thing I like for us to use as a basis of processing this whole discussion is 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 1. This is going to serve as a framework for everything we are going to be discussing. Because I've seen a sleight of hand of the enemy in ministry today, such that the things that are fundamental truths, are ancient landmarks, are things that should not be violated, that should be codes that should guide our practice in accurate ministry. Perversion is desperately trying to leverage it too. For instance, you will hear Paul establishing the fact that it is a requirement. First of all, he began by saying, you must perceive us as custodians of the oracles, of the mysteries of God. We are not just ministers, but we are holding in trust the secrets of God. And in view of that, a fundamental requirement is trustworthiness, reliability, faithfulness. This was the emphasis in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, earlier in the letter to the Corinthians, from verse 1 all the way through verse 3 to verse 4. He says it's a requirement that a steward, a custodian must be found faithful. So faithfulness is a fundamental requirement of someone who has been saddled with the responsibility of guardianship. Loyalty is a requirement. So because of these fundamental truths, you will see when perversion is being introduced to the body, instead of exposing it, instead of dissociating from it, We now have perspective today that insists that if you are truly loyal, where you see perversion, you should also protect it. You should also identify with it. Are we following? That's why it's important, first of all, before we commence this conversation, to set the coordinates, the framework within which everything we are going to discuss subsequently can be actualized. Outside of this framework, none of the things we are going to look at subsequently apply. Is that clear? So in 1 Corinthians 11 verse 1, Paul says, "Be ye followers of me, even as I also am of Christ." This is the framework. This is the limit to followership. Are we together? As long as there is consistency in aligning with Christ, then the office and the assignment of the associate pastor applies. The moment this first principle is violated, it is over. Because the Bible says, do not join the multitude to commit sin. That is an Old Testament canon law that God gave his people. Earlier this morning, during the opening prayer, God's servant was leading us to pray, and he brought an insight that a little percent of poison is lethal, such that the entire whole must be rejected. It's just like when they use cyanide to roast suya. When the long throat of the suya make you go to eat it, for the benefit of our international audience, what Nigerians call suya is actually roasted steak, beef that is put on sticks and placed on the hot coals and roasted. That's what we call suya. And when we call long throat, is our own version of the English. I don't know any way to translate that one for you. Because if you translate it, it will weaken the impact of the meaning. You will need a full paragraph to describe what we call long throat. It's an unbridled appetite. A kind of lust that is at another level, that does not listen to advice. So when a little toxic component is introduced, the whole must be rejected. That is the safety sense that must regulate the days that we live in. And so Paul begins by bringing the framework. Follow me as long as what? I am following Christ. The moment there is a slight angular shift, a slight deviation, there is grave wisdom for you to take caution and watch what is going on. Don't swallow it hook, line, sinker. Watch what is going on. Observe it. Is it a misstep that can be recovered, or is it a process of perversion that has been introduced and the man's heart is set on course to pursue it? That's why you need to hold back and watch. When there is a recovery and there is a continuing with Christ, you follow. But when you realize that you are waiting for this thing to change and it's getting worse, it calls for wisdom. That place you paused, don't move. You watch. If there is no hope of recovery, then it's unfortunate. You will risk and endanger your soul. So, first of all, this is the framework that we are going to use to look at the subject of the associate pastor. Now, to our text. 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 10. We'll read verse 10 to verse 12. 2 Kings chapter 3, verse 10 to verse 12. And the king of Israel said, Alas, that the Lord had called these three kings together to deliver them into the hand of Moab. And Jehoshaphat said, Is there not here a prophet of the Lord, that we may inquire of the Lord by him? And one of the king of Israel's servants answered and said, Here is Elisha, the son of Shaphat, which poured water on the hands of Elijah. And Jehoshaphat said, The word of the Lord is with him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him. Here we have a story of these three kings, the king of Israel, the king of Judah, and the king of Edom. They came into alliance because the nation of Edom, before this time, was under tribute to the northern kingdom of Israel. And they had fought them and defeated them in battle in the past. And rather than killing everybody that are part of the citizenship of Moab, they decide to leave all of them alive. They also decide to leave their government in place and place them under tribute, and told them that at the end of every harvest season, this percentage of your harvest, you must surrender them to us. So as a nation, all of you are our slaves. Do your business. At the end of the close of the business year, you bring so percentage of your enterprise to us, so you can stay alive, take care of your family, survive, thrive, but you owe us your lives. You must be paying us this tribute every year. And the deal was fine. But after some time, the Moabites were able to raise a fresh army that they believe that they can revolt against the king of the northern part of Israel. Because, after King Solomon's death, God divided the nation into two because Solomon married so many wives and introduced idolatry. And that was the judgment that God brought. So the northern nation of Israel, which constitute 10 tribes, were the ones that had that dominion over the nation of Moab. And when Moab had paid that tribute to them a few years, and they used that period of seeming peace to raise a fresh army and fortify themselves. The following year, they refused to pay the tribute and they revolted. And then the king of Israel felt, I have to go and put down this rebellion. And he reached out to his friend, the king of Judah, which is the southern nation of Israel. That's King Jehoshaphat. And then the neighboring kingdom, the kingdom of Edom. And so these three kings came together in an alliance to go and fight Moab and bring them back under subjugation to the northern kingdom of Israel. Do you get the context now? So, while they were marching their army, the path that they decided to take to go around in order to come and surprise Moab was so long a route that they didn't plan the journey very well. And so when they have gone very far, they realize that they are now too far from home, and they are now too far from where they are going, and the region where they were, there is no stream, there is no river, there is no water. And without any fight on their own, their condition is such that they will die out of thirst. Without Moab shooting one single arrow, all that army of 3 kings will be wasted. So it was in that critical moment, give me verse 11, that the guy that summoned his friends and their armies raised the cry. Sorry, where did we begin from? Verse 10. Yes, let's look at verse 10. And the king of Israel said, alas, the Lord had called these 3 kings together to deliver them into the hand of Moab. So when you read preceding verses, you will see the reason why he raised this cry. So when he raised this cry, the southern kingdom of Judah were still worshippers of Yahweh, even though the northern kingdom have gone to start serving Baal. So the king of the southern kingdom, Jehoshaphat, decided that in this kind of situation, this is where his God works. This is where his God that performs miracle, brings deliverance. So he now said, is there no genuine prophet around here? Because all we need now is a genuine, accurate prophet. And this our problem will be solved. And since it is in the territory of the northern kingdom, the king of Israel, that is the northern kingdom of Israel, now said, Prophet Elisha lives around this place. He is the one that poured water in the hand of Prophet Elijah. And then Jehoshaphat now said, the word of the Lord is with him. Let's go and see him. First of all, he was introduced, but just so that he can have a recommendation. Everybody knew who Elijah was. He had to be traced to Elijah. And then, the way he was traced to Elijah was that he served Elijah. He was Elijah's associate. He was Elijah's assistant. It was on that basis he got his credibility. It was on that basis that Jehoshaphat now said, the word of the Lord is with him. Because we can trace him to an accurate man. Are we following this morning? There is so much to unpack there. But like I said, our time is very short because it's a short charge. So we're going to just scrape a few things here and there. The first thing you get to notice there is the associate pastor has so much privileges that I want to highlight. And the reason I like to highlight them is because I want to address that quiet lust that makes it difficult for young men of our generation to be willing to serve. Everybody wants to be a founder and pioneer. The place of service is such a place where nobody wants to occupy today. The average young man has his calling, but he believes that going into service has the implication of making him lose his call. That is a very twisted understanding of Christian ministry. I'd like you to know that the place of service is a highly privileged place. And there is so much to unpack in that place. He said, this is the man that poured water in the hand of Elijah. And Jehoshaphat said, the word of the Lord is with him. If you must be relevant in the hand of God, even if you have a pioneering call, there is that place where you must draw your reference. And this is beyond looking for the most influential, powerful, popular man of God and connect and say, that's my father in the Lord. Just for purpose of credibility. What connected him to Elijah is not because he calls Elijah my man of God and post his picture big as a background and put himself in one corner to show that this is my man of God. Or use him as his wall or screensaver or DP. He said he poured water in the hand. There is a practical service involved there. I hope you know there were so many sons of the prophet, and there are several colleges and communities of sons of the prophet that Elijah was overseeing. There were some in Gilgal. There were some in Jericho. Are we together? It was in Gilgal that when it was time for Elijah to be taken from the surface of the earth, and he told Elisha that stay here in Gilgal because God asked me to go to the next town. And he said, as long as you are alive and as long as I am alive, I am not going to leave you. And shortly afterwards, the sons of the prophet within that community in Gilgal brought the word of the Lord to him. That's one community, but that's not the only community. There is another community in Jericho, such that even after Elijah had been taken off and Elisha returned with the mantle, they say, oh God, before you go, wait. Maybe as the Spirit of God took Elijah, he might have slipped out of his hand and he fall among the cracks in the mountain somewhere. Just calm down. Let's go and search. That's another community. There were several communities of sons of prophets that Elijah oversee. But we don't have a record of any of them that were said that this one is connected to Elijah. Why? There was one that did what? Poured water. All of us can be saying we are sons of Apostle Romelsai. How many of us pour water in his hand? Some of us, our spiritual father is on YouTube. He doesn't know you. You are the only one that knows him. Is that how your own father's relationship with you is? There is someone in your neighborhood that is a mature believer, but he is not known. So he cannot be your spiritual father. You cannot pour water there. Now, am I saying that you cannot have people in your life who don't know you, but you can follow? That's not the point I'm making. The point I am making is the need for practical service. Because today, when we talk about the issue of practical service, it's like the oil that you carry is allergic to getting your hands dirty. You know those days we were in the tent, as a minister in the house, all of us wash the toilet. During every contact, we all wash the plastic chairs, clean the cobwebs, clean the trenches. We do all the chores with everybody. But after everything, when it's time for service, we'll still serve as ministers in the house. And I remember a particular day, I asked one of the brethren around to go get a place cleaned, and he felt so insulted. He looked at me with so much pain. He said, you don't recognize the oil I carry. I had to apologize. Help me preach to your neighbor. Dirty chores does not affect the oil. Go and labor. Get your hands dirty. He said, this is Elisha that poured water in the hand. You don't know how demeaning that statement, the implication sounds. For you to be the one to pour water in the hand of someone else that is washing in that cultural context is a place of slavery, is a place of servitude, is the position of the underdog. But because you know you had an encounter, no, you cannot subject yourself to that. But you see, if you will ever be relevant in what God is doing, there must be that season of service in your life. Are we following? The anointing is not allergic to dirty chores. If you look at the calling of Elisha, the way God called him, first of all, God has appointed him. There's so much to cover. There are so many scriptures to go through, but God needs to show us mercy this morning. In the calling of Elijah, I will not bother us, but when you go to 1 Kings 19, from verse 15 to 16, that was where God revealed to Elisha his call on the life of Elisha. He said, appoint this man. Okay, let's look at it. And the Lord said unto him, that is to Elijah now, go return on thy way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when thou comest, anoint Hazael to be king over Syria, and Jehu the son of Nimshi shalt thou anoint to be king over Israel, and Elisha the son of Shaphat of Abel Meholah shalt thou anoint to be prophet in thy room. Did you see that? Now, I'd like us to skip to the subsequent verse 19 now. Verse 19. Let's look at verse 19. He says, so he departed thence and found Elisha the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen before him, and he with the 12th. And Elijah passed by him and cast his mantle upon him. Do you see how the calling came? The mantle came from the first day. But after the mantle came, he went to what? Servitude. Many of us, the way our calling came was so radical. But after that, nobody can ask us to do any dirty chore again. One night, we were in a vigil. Brethren were gaining ascendancy from 10 p.m., praying wall to wall. You know how we do it. Then at about 1 a.m. in the night, when the prayer had gotten to a height, you know, if you started like, you know this kind of prayer they call crankshaft prayer, where you grind it. Oh, the throat has become cracked. So, as a pastor, I was sensitive to the brethren laboring. And so I called the chief usher at the time. I told him, please, can you get us some bags of water? The brethren are laboring in prayers. So that the texture of their pharynx will not impact on this prayer going on. Now, there is a kiosk nearby us, if you know our location those days in the tent. As at that time, the woman have closed since 10 p.m. in the night. Nobody is there again. However, there's another place close to the roundabout in Wurukum. If you want to know the places I'm mentioning, please travel to Makurdi if you are following us online. there are great heritages. We will take you to those places. Please, let's see you very soon. Because these are historic sites you need to visit. Now, there's another place that is quite farther, that life goes on there through the night till early hours of the morning. So I called the chief usher. This is his office. I asked him, brother, please, can you get us some water? He casually went to the close-by shop where they sell water and came back and said they have closed. Of course they have closed. This is 1 a.m. I smiled. Then I called another brother who is not even in the ushering department. I told him, please get us water. Before I finished, the brother took off. After a while, he came back and said, how many bags, please? Do you know this kind of people? Were you that kind of child that was eager to run the errand, even when you have not heard what they ask you to go and get? As they say, can you took off. Then after a while, you remember that, what did they even say? He now ran back. Say, how many bags? These are 20 liters. That's like 20 kg. He's asking how many of it should I bring? But this other one that is chief usher is an anointed man. No, you can't send the anointed anyhow. You have to recognize the grace he carries. Because the anointed can't do chores. But the Bible where we read, it said the first day the calling came on him, he came with what? A mantle. It was after that mantle he went pouring water in the hand of Elijah. Oh my time is running really fast. Let me share a few things with you that are privileges of the associate pastor. The associate pastor sits in a high office. That's the first thing I want you to take note of. It is a calling in its own right. So there are two aspects to that. Even if you have a pioneering call, there must be that season in your life that you will learn to serve. Because that is where you learn the ropes of ministry. A lot of the mess we have today is because we have fathers who have never served. So they don't even know the ropes of ministry. They don't know what is our culture, what is our tradition. They don't know it. How do you manage the holy oracles? They don't know it. Why? They never served. They never served. So it's a high and privileged calling in its own right. Are we following? What you don't realize is, this is how the nature of God's kingdom operates. In God's rule, God sits as king, but he does not rule alone. He has what is called the divine counsel. The what? The divine counsel. When God is going to make a major decision, even though he does not need anyone, yet he works with his divine counsel. When you go to 1 Kings chapter 22 verse 19 to 20. 1 Kings 22, 19 to 20. There you see that God wants to determine the judgment over King Ahab. He could have easily done it. But in that passage, the Bible says, and he said, where did I say? 1 Kings what? 22. All right, verse 19. And he said, this is Prophet Micaiah, Hear thou therefore the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by him on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, who shall persuade Ahab that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said on this manner, and another said on that manner. The point I'm trying to make here is that God sits enthroned, but you see, he has a council around him. If God wants to make a decision, he makes some major decisions alongside his divine counsel. You see the same principle when God was teaching Moses on leadership. In Numbers 11, verse 16 to 17, you see him telling Moses, appoint 70 elders. These are people that led the congregation alongside Moses. On the one side, you will see them as Moses subservient. On the one side, you will see them as people that are slaving for Moses. They run errand for Moses. Moses gives them orders. Moses gives them instruction. You cannot wait to be your own boss where you will be the one ordering people around. But you know what? On the flip side, these are the men that constitute the leadership council. The same thing with Joshua. You get to see that Joshua was the minister, the servant of Moses. But he had access to the secrets, the mysteries of the kingdom. Are we following? So it is through service you get exposed to the dynamics of leadership. So it's a privileged office in its own right. The second point I want to make is the fact that it is through the wisdom of the office of the assistant that the move of God is established, that the purposes of God is established, that the heritage of God is preserved. It is impossible for one man to carry a move successfully. So God appoints a community around him that will ensure stability. Are we following? So the next time you have an opportunity to be a part of a move of God, you may not be the one God had called to pioneer the move. But the way God smuggled you into that package is through service. As you occupy that place of service, you become a partaker of that move. And through your life, critical aspects of that move is established, is preserved. Through your life, there are dimensions of that move that God wants to birth, that the visioneer is not capable of carrying it out because of his human limitation. Are we following? Through service, God puts your own package there. And as you go to pour water, as you go to serve, as you go to slave, your own breaks out too. Number 3. Through the wisdom of the office of the associate, the heritage of God is preserved from one generation to another generation. It is through service of the associate pastor that God preserves the the heritage of God across the generations. You were part of the previous move. You understand the architecture of that move. You were young at the time. When the pioneers and the visionaries of that move are off the stage, you carry that move into the next generation. That was what we found with Elisha. Are we following today? It's a great wisdom of God. But when Satan wants to cut off a move, what he does is to pollute the associates. Every time Satan wants to truncate a major revival, what he does is what? To pollute the associates. To pollute the associates. Let's look at just one example. Second Kings chapter 4. Give me verse 8 as I begin to wrap up. 2 Kings chapter 4 verse 8. And it fell on a day that Elisha passed to Shunem, where was a great woman, and she constrained him to eat bread. And so it was that as oft as he passed by, he turned in thither to eat bread. And she said unto her husband, Behold now, I perceive that this is an holy man of God, which passeth by us continually. Let us make a little chamber, I pray thee, on the wall, and let us set for him there a bed, and a table, and a stool, and a candlestick. And it shall be, when he cometh to us, that he shall turn in thither. And it fell on a day that he came thither, and he turned in to the chamber and laid there. And he said to Gehazi his servant, Call this Shunammite woman. And when he had called her, she stood before him. You know, when they began this story, it looked like it was only Elisha that was passing that way, isn't it? But when he got to this point, it became clear that he was not passing there alone. What's going on here? He learned how to transfer the heritage of God to the next generation by having an associate. The same way he was an associate to his former prophet. Are you seeing the same wisdom? I will show you how that it is through service you learn the secrets of the kingdom. Everything he learned from Elijah, you will see him transferring it to the next generation. Carefully. Just copy here, paste there. But when we have leaders who never served, they will be left to their own whims. They will be left to their own creativity. You see, last night, the word of the Lord came so strong that we should not be creative. We will not innovate. Innovation comes when you never had the privilege to learn the right thing because you never served. But you see, the first thing I like to point to you here, like I said, when Satan wants to cut off a move, he pollutes the associate. So from this passage, you clearly see that Gehazi saw the perks, the privileges that is possible in ministry. I remember several years ago, when our father in the Lord was transferred initially to Lagos, and he moved his family at the initial time. So whenever he comes home for the monthly contact, he no longer have a home in Makurdi. So the earlier days, Reverend Shala had a prayer chalet in his house. So Apostle goes to rest for that weekend in that prayer chalet. And we have the contact, and then he goes back. So one of the nights, we're all with him, the ministers in the house, and we had this, our wonderful mommy of blessed memory, Momieru. She has the helps ministry from the Lord. And in such days, Momieru come with this big cooler. So this particular night, Momieru came with her cooler. And after she left, ministers were all seated. And when they opened the cooler, oh my God, chicken meat of all sorts. Some were looking up like this. Some were like this. And Papa looked at the cooler and said, this is why some people are called. I mean, they call themselves into ministry. When you saw what... See, Gehazi saw something. That's what I'm trying to say. He saw that a prophet can be trekking, but just because he is a prophet, there's what is called the prophet offering. There's what is called the cup of the prophet. You know, Jesus said, if you give a disciple a glass of water in the name of a disciple, then he took it higher and he said, if you give a prophet, that thing is a fact of ministry. As an associate, beware of the gift of the prophet. Because men that have sense will perceive that you are a holy man, like the Shunammite woman perceived. She told her husband, I perceive that this is a man of God. So while you are serving, men that will perceive your boss as accurate, they will come. Gehazi will be watching. He will be seeing the privileges. You see, Elijah was an endangered species. Everybody dreaded him. People hated him. So when Elisha was serving him, what he learned was the rugged way. Are we following? Elijah was haunted. He was under threat. I hope you know it was after he was running from his life from Jezebel. It was that period that Elisha's calling activated into service. So all he saw was rugged, hardship, labor, rigor. I want to quickly introduce something in a few seconds. You see, the first generation, the kind of temper and vengeance of the emphasis. Reverend Tony. You realize that when you watch Apostles' messages 2007, 2008, oh my, you know that we just die. Just die. With your certificate, come and die. Dry. Those are the days of Procato, Reverend Matthew. But you see, that time we go to the villages for missions. The speakers are the type that they use for tapia business. You will say something. You will hear your voice from the speakers. You will wonder if that is you that spoke. All the equipment we take for crusade those days. In fact, Reverend Shala had one pickup truck, Tata. All the whole equipment will fit into the pickup truck. All of us will fit into the pickup truck. The whole team. The equipment on this stage are more than the things we take for crusade those days. Is to go and die. But in the next generation, now we have light, we have smoke screen, we have blending of colors. Everything is beautiful. This is the generation of Elisha. Kings hated Elijah, but some kings loved Elisha and called him my father, my father. When a king call you my father, You know, ministry have changed level. Beware when you come into service when ministry has changed level. The consecrations that Elisha got from Elijah in the next generation. I don't know if Elisha saw anybody sowing into Elijah's life other than trying to hunt him to kill him. But in the generation of Gehazi, men were sowing into Elisha, and that was what Gehazi saw. He did not see the consecration of Elisha that he got from Elijah. And what happened thereafter? You see, let's go to verse 29. Gehazi saw the dividend. In verse 29, then he said to Gehazi, get up thy loins and take my staff in thy hand and go thy way. If thou meet any man, salute him not. And if any man salute thee, answer him not, and lay my staff upon the face of the child. This was a situation where God, through prophet Elisha, had blessed the Shunammite woman who was barren, and she now had a son. The son had grown, had been weaned, can now talk. And then mysteriously the son dies. And the woman ran back to Elisha and said, I was living well, I didn't bother you. You were the one that said you saw me and I should have a child. Now the child have died. Come and do something about it. And Elisha gave Gehazi his staff. What I want to show you is that Elisha showed Gehazi the secrets of power. Elisha introduced Gehazi to the dynamics of the kingdom that he learned from Elijah. What is the evidence for that? Let me show you where Elisha got that from. Let's compare this thing to 2 Kings chapter 2 verse 14. He said, and Elisha took the mantle of Elijah that fell from him and smote the waters and said, where is the Lord God of Elijah? And when he also had smitten the water, they parted hither and thither, and Elijah went over. That was where he learned that thing. It meant this thing works. If the mantle was handed to you, it should work. It should work. It should work. Elisha handed the mantle to Gehazi. He did not work. Why? His eyes were on something else. They were not on the consecrations of the man. They were on the perks and the privileges in that office. As an associate pastor, if God loves you, he will make you serve in the season where things are dry, so that you will not have distraction. You will learn the right thing. But if it is in the days that we are now flying all over the world that you came, be wise. Be wise. You see, many of us believe that when we are trying to introduce you to the consecration of this way, you will say you want us to suffer, but you are cruising in jeep. You are driving car with AC, and you want us to be trekking. You are not wise. We want to show you the path that lead to the real deal. But many of the young people today, they are excited with the glamour. The reason why they are, in fact, you see that for Elisha, we knew how he was called. But we don't know how Gehazi was called. We don't know whether he called himself when he saw the pleasure that Elisha was into, there is a great wisdom as an associate pastor to focus on the consecrations of the man. The mantle was supposed to walk in the hand of Gehazi, but it did not walk. It walked when it fell to Elisha. He took the mantle and struck the Jordan, and the Jordan parted way, because he was focused on the consecrations of Elijah. The same mantle was handed over. You know, in the case of Elisha, they didn't even want to give him. The thing fell. He fell by force. He served. It's as though Elijah kept discouraging him. Stay here. He said, as thy soul liveth, and as I am alive, I will not stay back. When the point came, he said, I need this thing from you. He said, if you see me when I go, it's as though Elijah wanted to take the thing to heaven by all means. Elisha had to cry, my father, I see you, my father. The thing had to fall by force. When he laid hold on it, it walked in his hand. Those of you that love to be given mantle, it may not walk in your hand. If you don't serve with your heart, if you don't desire the consecrations in the office, it will not work in your hand. It did not work in the hand of Gehazi. And we eventually saw the reason why it did not work. We saw the reason. Can we see chapter 5, verse 15 and 16? And then we'll skip to verse 19. Chapter 5, verse 15 now. We all know the reason why it did not work. You see, in the days of Elijah, no king consulted him. Rather, they wanted to kill him. But in the days of Elisha, kings were consulting him. The captain of Syria met him because he was advised he could get his healing by the maid in his house in the ministry of Elisha. He came. Elisha ministered to him. He went to the Jordan. He was healed. And he returned from Jordan to the man of God, he and all his company, and came and stood before him and said, behold, now I know that there is no God in all the earth, but in Israel. Now, therefore, I pray thee, take a blessing of thy servant. But he said, as the Lord liveth, before whom I stand, I will receive none. And he urged him to take it, but he refused. Is it not the same Elisha? A wealthy woman gave gift and he accepted. The same Elisha, this Syrian captain, gave gift and he rejected. How did he know when to accept and when to reject? During service. Discernment. He learned it in the course of service. There are some things that cannot be taught. You need to stay closely to observe the right things in order to learn it. There are some decisions today we make. There's no textbook where it is. It was because we were hanging around the apostle over the years. We saw the ones he accepted. We saw the ones he rejected. I remember many years ago, somebody gave him, oh no, I will not say this one in public. Because we are in the days of bloggers. I will not say this one in public. If you hear gifts he rejected when we were still trekking, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. In the process of service, you pick up wisdom. You will know what to accept, what to reject, why to accept, why to reject. Those ones cannot be taught. It has to be observed. Let's go to verse 19. Gehazi watched when Elisha accepted gift from the Shunammite woman. And Gehazi is still watching as Elisha is rejecting gift from the Syrian captain. But what did Gehazi do? And he said unto him, go in peace. This is Elisha telling the Syrian captain now. Go in peace. So he departed from him a little way. Next verse. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said, behold, my master have spared Naaman this Syrian in not receiving at his hand that which he brought. But as the Lord liveth, I will run after him and take not everything, somewhat. Something must drop. Next verse. So Gehazi followed after Naaman, and when Naaman saw him running after him, he lighted down from the chariot to meet him and said, is all well? And he said, all is well. My master has sent me, saying, behold, even now there be come to me from Mount Ephraim 2 young men of the sons of the prophets. Give them, not me, do what? Give them, I pray thee, a talent of silver and 2 changes of garment. Now, when you compare what Naaman originally brought, it's not equal. It's just what? Somewhat. And Naaman said, be content. Take 2 talents. And he urged him. Hey, are you in that place where you are saying no, but they are insisting? Say, it's not like I want this thing, but the person is insisting. So this is why, last night, Apostle Gideon was teaching. And he was saying how that God told Moses, I will wipe these people and build this nation with you. He said, if that came to us today, what would we say? You are God. You are all-knowing. Nobody can question you. You are the one insisting, That's what we find here. He urged him and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 changes of garments and laid them upon 2 of his servants, and they bare them before him. And when he came to the tower, he took them from their hand and bestowed them on the house and left the men go, and they departed. But he went in, cleaned his mouth, and stood before his master. And Elisha said unto him, whence comest thou, Gehazi? And he said, thy servant went no whither. And he said unto him, went not mine heart with thee when the man turned again from his chariot to meet thee? Then hear the question. Is it a time to receive money and to receive garment and olive yards and vineyards and sheep and oxen and men servants and maid servants? The leprosy therefore of Naaman shall cleave unto thee and unto thy seed forever. And he went out from his presence a leper as white as snow. I'd like us to bow our heads. Is it time to receive money? When your heart, as you serve as an associate, is not right, you will see the kind of men that come to the prophet that sow heavy seed. That will become your motivation for ministry. It is not a blessing when your own service is in the season of greatness. It's not a blessing, so-called. You may think it's a blessing. If God wants to show you mercy, he makes you serve in the season of dryness. I'd like you to pray this morning in a moment. as we receive the word of the Lord. Oh God, purge my heart. Give me the eyes to focus on the right things. Give me the eyes to focus on the consecration, not on the privileges. As I serve, as I see greatness all over, help me not to prioritize the wrong things. It's usually more difficult when in the service of your ministry, God has brought abundance. It may be difficult to filter through the abundance and identify the consecrations. It may look easier for Elisha because there were death threats all over the place. There was hardship when he was serving. There was danger. There was drought. But in the season of Gehazi, oh, God has visited. There was abundance. But Elisha never lost his consecration. Can you still serve accurately in the season of abundance? Or will you allow the wealth around to distract you and make you believe that, oh, when you serve God, if me too, I serve here and I hang around a while, I will also enter into my own. And that becomes your focus. That becomes your focus. You are not wise to trace the history. You are not wise to trace the history. Minister Smith, can you come and take us